saying she would obliterate Iran if she becomes president. Now, this is really scary stuff, you know. And if this was to protect Israel, she actually said it, you know. So, do you think that that was just hyperbole, or how worrying is Hillary Clinton as president?
Well, my Irish grandmother warned me never to say anything bad about anyone. So I can't say anything at all about Hillary Clinton. But I will say this. And not only did she say she would, or Iran could be obliterated, but also that Putin is Hitler.
Yeah.
Now, if you know anything about Russian history, even just World War II, where the Russians lost 27 million people, okay, to Hitler. I mean, if there's anything worse she could have said about Putin, who enjoys an 82% popularity rate. I mean, there's nothing worse than that. So, now, there's one particular set of circumstances having to do with Iran, where Hillary Clinton was really responsible for turning down a deal that was even better than the one we finally reached. President Obama wrote a letter to the President of Brazil and the Prime Minister of Turkey and said, look, if you could work out this kind of arrangement with the Iranians to get rid of this much of this processed uranium and so forth, this would be really good. See if you can do that. They sold it. They sold it to, what's his name, the real crazy guy. Say again? Ahmadinejad, right. Now, you can see signs, you can see photos of them, you know, 3 of them joining hands. She comes back, or they come back, and it turns out that Hillary Clinton says, my answer to that agreement is sanctions. I've persuaded the Russians and the Chinese to agree not to veto a sanctions bill. I'm going to put in sanctions against Iran. So, what happened? The President Da Silva of Brazil writes a letter to the, well, he doesn't write a letter, he releases the letter that Obama had sent him, saying, you know, please work out something like this, and it turns out to be pretty exactly what he did work out. So he asked, you know, who's running things? Who's running things in Washington right now? Well, it wasn't Obama. You know, this was a very bizarre set of circumstances. There was in writing, and they had done it, Silva and Arrow. So yeah, so she's, you know, people asked me on radio today whether I thought she was corrupt, and I tried to dance around that, but I think what I ended up saying was, you know, well, yes, she's as corrupt as could be, and these emails show it. I mean, you know, just a final word on these because everybody's interested in it, or mostly. So Julian Assange gets leaked to him. Julian Assange does not hack. He gets leaked to him a whole array of emails from Hillary Clinton and from the Democratic National Committee. And he works with them as he always does, but he doesn't change anything, right? He keeps them pristine pure. Some of his releases have gotten people out of prison, prevented people from going to prison because he never fools with them. He doesn't even fool with the metadata on the top, okay? They're pristine pure. So finally, he gets them all together in a collated way, and he releases them 2 days before the Democratic National Convention. Wow! You know, what do they say? They say, with no uncertainty, Hillary Clinton has stolen the nomination from Bernie Sanders. Pure and simple. As soon as it comes out, the first 5 people from the Democratic National Committee quit. Okay? Now, here's Hillary Clinton and her war room team, you know. Oh my God, what are we going to do? Somebody says, well, I know. Blame it on the Russians. And Hillary says, Russians? But it wasn't the Russians, it was Julian Assange. Oh, that's all right. We'll say that Julian Assange does work for the Russians. Oh, well, that's a twofer. That sounds pretty good. But what would be the rationale? Oh, come on, Hillary. Putin wants Trump to win. That's clear as day. Now, Hello, yeah, I think I know something about how Russians look at American leaders. And here's a guy who is, be right there. Here's a guy who advertises unpredictability and says, he says, I'm so unpredictable, I'm very proud of it, and takes violent offense at the least imagined slight. Now, that's the kind of guy that Putin would like to have on a nuclear button. Give me a break. So the whole thing, the whole solution falls apart. Please, sorry to ignore you so long.
In America, in the election at the moment,
I'm sorry?
in America, in the election at the moment, Trump v. Clinton, there's a whole bunch of people who will say Trump is a maniac and he's a danger to the world, which is true. And that therefore, you mustn't say anything against Hillary. Go with Hillary. There's another bunch of people who will say Hillary is a crook and Hillary is a warmonger, and so that makes Trump the friend of the working man, which is nonsense. Right. But there's a touch of this in this meeting, because we have discovered, have we not, that American imperialism is the biggest imperialist power in the world, which is true, and that the CIA and the American media are liars, which is true. And from that we seem to be saying that if anybody says anything bad about anybody else, they're just believers in American propaganda and so on. And I'm sorry, this isn't true. Let's take the Assad regime for a start.
Assad, okay.
The Assad regime. Assad was a dictator, is a dictator, was a dictator, and his father was a dictator before him. And his father then carried out a terrible massacre in Hama in 1982.
Right.
And I don't say this because I'm a victim of American propaganda and I've been brainwashed. Anybody who knows me, I've participated in anti-war movements against America since the Vietnam War. The reason I say this is because I'm told it by activists in the Middle East that the Syrian regime was a legendary dictatorship with a torture apparatus and a secret police and so on, etc. It's true, I'm afraid, that Gaddafi was a dictator. The fact that the Americans intervened in Libya doesn't mean that Gaddafi was an okay person and so on and all right. And the fact that America is an imperialist power does not mean, I'm afraid, that Russia is not an imperialist power. Russia has got a long record of invading and oppressing other countries, right? And do we really imagine that Putin and the Russians are involved in Syria out of internationalist solidarity with the Syrian people?
Who suggested that?
He's protecting his oil supply to Europe, which the Qataris are trying to
Exactly.
That's fine, but the greatest threat to the world is
Well,
US
I didn't interrupt
There's
you.
only
Excuse
one.
me, I did not interrupt
okay,
you.
fair enough.
And it's interesting, isn't it? The only person who has been interrupted was me, because I'm saying what you don't want to hear. That's true, isn't it? Yeah. Now, what I'm saying is, to understand that there is more than one imperialist power in the world does not make you an agent of American imperialism or someone who's brainwashed by American imperialism. There is inter-imperialist rivalry in the world. And I think if we're an anti-war movement and we are opposed to war, we should condemn both American and Western imperialism in the Middle East, including in Mosul, including in Syria, and the Russian bombing of Aleppo and the Russian intervention in Syria, and we should oppose all foreign imperialist intervention in Syria and allow the Syrian people to settle their own account with Assad and to determine their own future.
Yeah, thanks so much to all speakers. Obviously, it's an interesting conversation. We've been talking about CIA, the press, and all those things. I don't think that are specific to any era. I mean, every press ultimately is a business. Some people make profit out of selling papers and advertising and marketing, and obviously closely linked to any system that's ruling the country or the region or whatever. So I don't necessarily think that we are in an extraordinary situation in terms of press manipulating reality, etc. Right? I mean, obviously, we can debate that longer if people are not happy with what I'm suggesting. But I think one thing we have forgotten since the beginning of this meeting